You are watching Codexum. Signal archive, the fragments remain. In the mid-1960s, at the height of cold war secrecy, a classified naval experiment unfolded deep beneath the North Atlantic. Far from shipping lanes, satellites, and civilian awareness, a project so restricted that even within the military its existence was known only through clearance codes and redacted memos. Few people ever knew it existed, and even fewer remained long enough to speak about it. It was called Project Codexum, an ambitious attempt to create the world's first reliable long-distance underwater communication system. But from its earliest days, the project would reveal anomalies the ocean itself seemed unwilling to release. Strange signals emerged. Ecosia behaved incorrectly, and messages were received that no one had transmitted. This is the story of the experiment, history almost erased. Inside dimly lit naval laboratories, figures stood silently in white coats as oscilloscopes pulsed and thick cables coiled across steel floors like dormant sea creatures. By the 1960s, global powers were locked in a silent arms race beneath the sea as nuclear submarines prowled the depths undetectable but also unreachable. Radio waves collapsed almost instantly underwater, and traditional sonar traveled far but shredded clarity into noise. Miscommunication at those depths could trigger catastrophic escalation. Naval scientists proposed something radical: ultra-low-frequency sonic pulses capable of traveling thousands of kilometers through layered ocean strata. Tones too deep to be heard, only felt as pressure, but generating such frequencies demanded immense power, and no one fully understood how the ocean itself would react. No names recorded, no photographs taken, only clearance symbols and numeric identifiers. Early tests began modestly, with stationary transmitters positioned near the continental shelf sending short pulses across limited distances. The results surprised analysts as signals traveled farther than models predicted, returning cleaner and more coherent. Encouraged by early success, Command authorized a mobile platform, a submarine, and in November 1964 the NSS Arcturus was selected. Outwardly unremarkable, yet internally transformed, with a reinforced hull, experimental receivers, and prototype ultra-low-frequency emitters. Embedded deep within its structure, the construction of these emitters was a saga of technical frustration and escalating cost. The core component, a massive transducer array, required exotic alloys and superconducting magnets that constantly failed under pressure tests. The lead engineer, known only as Dr. K, was found one morning slumped over his blueprints. A single but whispers in the hangar spoke of a sudden, paralyzing fear of the deep. The Arcturus's refit took 18 months longer than scheduled, a period marked by repeated failures of the hull-mounted acoustic lenses, which seemed to warp and crack not from external pressure, but from the sheer internal force of the prototype ULF generator. Inside the control room, crew members moved in disciplined silence as pale instrument light reflected across smooth, featureless heads. At precisely 9:43, the Arcturus descended deeper than any previous live communications test. The water darkened, pressure intensified, metal groaned softly as if protesting the depth. The order came to transmit. The submarine released its first ultra-low-frequency pulse. A sound too deep for hearing, felt instead as a vibration through bone and steel. The pulse traveled, dispersed, and reverberated through the abyss. Then seconds later, the receivers activated on their own. A response appeared, not static, not distortion, but a perfect inversion of the transmitted signal. Submarine, same structure, same timing, but reversed. Later described in logs as an echo with intention. Reflections were expected, yet reflections do not reorganize themselves. Crew members exchanged uneasy glances. Command approved a second test. Weeks later, the Arcturus returned and descended far beyond established safety margins. The hull creaked continuously. The crew transmitted a longer, complex pattern engineered to eliminate coincidence. For nearly a full minute, the ocean remained silent, then receivers activated without command lights flickered needles. Jumped violently, a new signal arrived, not mirrored, not reflected, but rearranged their own transmission processed and returned. altered. Something had received it. Something had interpreted it. Crew members later described an overwhelming sensation of being observed, despite no visual confirmation. Command should have halted the project, but instead authorized escalation. During the third test, the crew transmitted a simple repeating tone, devoid of complexity. No structure, no data, only presence. Minutes passed in silence. Then an immense signal swept across the bandwidth with impossible strength. No known submarine could generate it, and no geological structure matched its frequency profile. The source originated below the Arcturus at depths beyond mapped ocean limits. The pulse repeated 3 times, growing stronger with each cycle as if something vast was shifting beneath layers of pressure. The hull vibrated violently, not from collusion, but proximity. Sonar systems captured a silhouette too large to classify, too smooth to be geological, moving deliberately and responding with rhythmic pulses synchronized to the transmission. Emergency ascent was ordered immediately, but before the submarine rose, the vibrations returned stronger, brushing the hull like a passing mass. Afterward, the Navy classified the incident as structural interference. The crew knew otherwise. Project Echo Depth was terminated overnight. Funding vanished. Reports sealed. Personnel reassigned or quietly discharged. Official statements cited unreliable equipment and excessive cost. Yet declassified internal documents reveal handwritten annotations, reading signal patterns to organized. Origin depth exceeds known limits. Recommend total shutdown. All third test recordings were locked away and never released. The aftermath of the project left a lingering shadow over the naval community, as those involved began to report a series of inexplicable psychological symptoms. The technicians who had monitored the signals found themselves unable to sleep, haunted by the memory of that rhythmic, subsonic pulse that seemed to vibrate not just in their ears, but in their very souls. Some claimed they could still hear the signal in the silence of their own homes, a low-level hum that persisted even after the equipment had been dismantled and sold for scrap. One particular researcher, identified only as Researcher X in the redacted files, became obsessed with the mathematical structure of the return signals. He spent his final days in a secluded coastal cottage, filling thousands of pages with complex geometric patterns that he claimed were a visual representation of the Oceanus response. His notes suggested that the signals were not just communication, but a form of mapping, as if the entity below was using the pulses to scan the world above, just as the Navy was scanning the depths below. Erotof, a reciprocal consciousness that had been awakened by the Arcturus, a force that had been dormant for eons, and was now aware of the flickering presence of humanity on the surface. His final, most disturbing entry was a single, perfect spiral drawn in his own blood, a pattern that mirrored the sonar trace of the object below the Arcturus. The Navy's decision to seal the third test recordings was not merely a matter of security, but of survival, as the final minutes of the tape supposedly contained sounds that were not mechanical or biological in any known sense. Witnesses who heard the raw audio described it as a folding of space, a sound that made the listeners feel as though they were being pulled into a void. The Arcturus itself was decommissioned shortly after and sold to a private contractor for dismantling. But workers at the shipyard reported that the hull continued to vibrate for months, even after the engines and emitters had been removed. They spoke of a cold resonance that chilled the air around the vessel, and several workers refused to enter the lower decks, claiming they felt a presence watching them from the shadows of the empty ballast tanks. The project's legacy persisted in the form of the Echo Ghost theory among some, a superstition that certain frequencies should be avoided at all costs, lest they draw the attention of the deep waders. The nameless things that dwell in the Hato zones, where the light of the sun has never reached. Even today, modern sonar operators sometimes report catching a glimpse of a silhouette that matches the one recorded by the Arcturus. A massive, smooth shape that moves with a grace impossible for its size, disappearing into the trenches before it can be properly tracked. The files of Project Echo Depth remain mostly classified, but the few pages that have leaked into the public domain serve as a grim reminder that the ocean is not just a body of water but a vast, silent witness to a history we are not yet ready to understand. The figures of the 1960s may be gone, but the echoes they triggered continue to ripple through the darkness, waiting for the next pulse to call them back to the surface. And as we push further into the abyss, With our new technologies, we must ask ourselves if we are prepared for the answer that will inevitably come back from the deep. The final transmission of the Arcturus, though officially lost, was rumored to have been intercepted by a Soviet listening post in the Barents Sea. The Soviet analysts were reportedly so disturbed by the data that they immediately halted their own deep-sea acoustic research, fearing they had stumbled upon a weapon or a deity that defied their dialectical materialism. The two superpowers, for a brief moment in the height of the Cold War, shared a silent understanding that the deep ocean was a frontier that should remain closed, a sanctuary for a power that did not care for ideologies or borders. The officers who signed the final shutdown orders did so with a sense of profound relief, knowing that they were burying a secret that could have unraveled the very fabric of their reality, and so the North Atlantic remains a graveyard of secrets where the rusted hull of the Arcturus's legacy lies forgotten, and the ether-like silence of the depths continues to guard the mystery of the signal that was never meant to be heard. A signal that proved, once and for all, that we are never truly alone, even in the most isolated corners of our world, and that the greatest mysteries are not found in the stars above, but in the crushing, silent darkness beneath our feet. The Soviet reaction was not just fear, but a desperate, almost panicked attempt to erase their own parallel research known as Project Hydrotasina, Hydrosilence, which had been running concurrently in the Pacific. Their own experiments had yielded similar, though less violent, results, signals that returned not inverted but subtly corrected. As if an intelligence was politely editing their transmissions for grammatical errors, the Soviet command structure, rigid and imposing, saw this as an act of intellectual superiority by an unknown enemy, a psychological warfare tactic from a source they could not locate. The signal intercepted from the Arcturus's third test, however, was different. It was raw, terrifying, a sound that seemed to dismantle the very concept of asterisk. Self-asterisk, in the minds of the analysts. One Soviet technician, a figure named Ivan, spent 3 days in a catatonic state after listening to the raw tape. His only utterance upon waking was a single word in an ancient, forgotten dialect of Siberian: the wait. The Soviet Politburo, already paranoid, concluded that the Americans had unleashed a weapon that could drive men mad, and the immediate shutdown of Hydrotasina was a move of self-preservation, not scientific caution. The two superpowers, unknowingly, had both retreated from the same abyss. The crew of the NSS Arcturus, the men who had been closest to the source, faced a fate far worse than simple reassignment. The captain, a man known as Commander R, was given a desk job in a landlocked state, but he never stopped drawing the silhouette, the massive, smooth shape that had brushed the hull. He would fill his office walls with charcoal sketches, each one slightly different, slightly more detailed, until his superiors found him one morning, his hands raw and bleeding, trying to carve the shape into the steel of his desk. The chief sonar operator was discharged with a diagnosis of severe acoustic trauma, but his trauma was not from the volume, but the asterisk, meaning asterisk of the sound. He claimed the final pulse was not a signal, but a asterisk question. Asterisk, a query so profound that his human mind could not process the answer. It implied he spent the rest of his life standing by the ocean, throwing stones into the water, waiting for the echo. The rest of the crew scattered, faceless ghosts in the machine of the military, each carrying a piece of the silence, a memory of the vibration, a certainty that they had touched something that should have remained dormant. The final fate of the Arcturus's experimental ULF emitter is perhaps the most chilling detail. After the submarine was sold for scrap, the massive transducer array was supposedly destroyed, melted down in a high-temperature furnace, but a recently declassified memo from the scrapyard foreman, a man named Mr. J, details an anomaly. The core of the transducer, the part that had generated the forbidden frequency, refused to melt. It remained a perfect cold sphere of exotic alloy, vibrating faintly on the floor of the furnace. The foreman, terrified, ordered it buried deep beneath the yard. A silent, rhythmic pulse, now emanating from the earth itself. A constant, low-level hum that only the local dogs seemed to notice. A final, physical fragment of Project Ecodep. A reminder that some experiments, once started, can never truly be stopped. They merely change their medium. And the ocean, the great, silent witness, continues to wait, its depths holding a secret that was briefly disturbed by the arrogance of man. A secret that is now fully awake, fully aware, and listening. Always listening for the next pulse, The next question. The next sign that humanity is ready to descend once more into the realm of the Deep Waiters. This is Codexum, signing off from the Signal Archive, where the fragments remain and the echoes never truly die. This Codexum, where anomalies are documented, not explained.